Welcome to Beyond Revenue, Narratives of Revenue Leaders. Today we talked about scaling B2B SaaS and the six pillars or the six questions that really matters to grow a company from 1 to 100 million ARR. My guest of the show was Anoop Vasisht, a very extremely versatile go-to-market professional. He grew a company from 1 to 100 million ARR. He has a background in investing. He worked across the world in all continents, did sales in more or less all the big regions. We covered all the different topics around structures, processes, strategy, a lot about culture. Quite interesting discussion around there. So dive in and let me know what you thought. Welcome to Beyond Revenue, Narratives of Revenue Leaders. Anoop, I'm extremely happy to have you today in the show. You have been an operator, worked across, I would say, the entire world in all continents as a GTM expert. You have scaled companies from 1 to over 100 million ARR. On the other side, you're an investor supporting B2B clients. So really interested in both views. And today we want to talk about the scaling B2B SaaS, and we nailed it down into six topics in order to discuss it. But before we start, I would kindly ask you to present yourself on your own words, because you can do that much better than I can do it.
So first of all, thank you so much for having me, Michael. I know it's been a long time pending topic. But I have the highest regards for what you are doing together with Kremansky and everything that you're supporting for the ecosystem for B2B companies in Europe. So super happy to be here. An intro from my end, I started my career as an engineer working with SAP Labs, consulting with Accenture, moved on to work with Rocket Internet, which was my true school on how you scale companies. I was very fortunate to be in the early days of scaling companies with them. Went on to join ProSiebenSat Media, where I focused on international investments and international business development. Ended up joining one of the company that we invested in, which was Dynamic Yield, very small company back then, sub 1 million in ARR, and worked initially across helping them scale in international markets outside of the US. Ended up becoming their chief revenue officer, and now I ended up being with Mastercard after their acquisition a couple of years ago. So that's really who I am. Happy to get started.
Yes. Love the experience here, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion. And yes, indeed, we tried already a while, but now we're there. I would say let's get started with a small warm up. Yeah, I ask you six questions, and you can answer it in one word, and to get us into the topic of the six pillars. GTM in one word, or what does it really mean for you?
It's a strategic plan that needs to keep getting updated every now and then.
Fair. The weakest link, which is one of the GTM pillars, right, from marketing, sales, customer success, and partnerships, which is neglected most by founders.
I've repeatedly seen that marketing and partnerships are two areas that are repeatedly neglected.
Fair. I can agree. Timing, what's the earliest, let's say, signal you see a startup needs a formal GTM strategy?
I think it's probably not a very clear indication, but I think it's the closest that I can think of, which is when your A's are consistently having their pipeline overflowing, or that it's consistently full, no matter whether you have two A's or you add on a couple of more A's and it's still full. That's when you need a repeatable GTM motion.
Fair. Positioning, what's the biggest mistake companies do?
Not updating it on a regular cadence. Especially when you're scaling, your company keeps changing, needs to update
What
it.
fair? What's tougher, multi-product or multi-market?
Both are equally tough.
Future in one word. How is AI changing B2B sales?
Doing more with less people.
That's good. I like it. So let's get started from your perspective, right? From as an operator as well as an investor, right? GTM, we always use it as a buzzword, but what does it really mean for you?
Ultimately, from my perspective, go to market is essentially a combination of what you do with three key pillars. The first pillar is essentially all the things that you need to do with product. The second pillar is everything that you need to do with the people that you build a GTM structure with. And the third one is essentially how can you ensure that this can all operate without having dependency on people or products, which is essentially the process that you build around it. So if you can focus on the product topics, the people topics, and the process topics, I think you will have a strong go-to-market structure in place.
Yeah, fair. What's in your opinion the biggest challenge in the one topic? Because what we see is a lot of startups completely underestimate the complexity of GTM. So why is this in your opinion? And maybe in your words, what's the cost of it?
Usually, I think most of the problems occur when you start to focus on products, people, and process in a completely different order. I think the first area that you want to get right is everything with product, and that includes things around, what are the products that you have? How do you package them? What's the value story for each product? To ensure that you have on paper, it's very clear about what you're selling, what's the value add, what's the pricing, is it competitive, and so on and so forth. So that's really everything under the product that you need to solve first. And the second pillar to solve for is the people. What are the minimum viable team that you need to have to set up your go to market? How do you create a playbook around new business, existing business, channel partnerships, inside sales, rev ops, and so on and so forth? And that's really the people problem. The problem occurs when you invest heavily on people when you don't have your product market fit, or when you haven't invested enough into ensuring that you can support your the people that you hire. And then the third pillar is the processes that you develop around products and people. So you can't have an early stage company which is doing 5 million in ARR where you're heavily indexing only on processes when you don't have your product and people right, or any other way. So for me, it's key that, and this needs to keep happening over and over time when you launch a new product, when you launch a new market, you got to do these three things every now and then, but it needs to be in that order: getting your product right, getting your people in place, ensuring that there are processes that are supporting them, but in that order.
Fair. And what would you say is right when you it's not so easy to prioritize right in the beginning, yeah? So obviously you need to define, and I truly believe in it, you need to understand your product, you need to under segment right quite in the beginning. So who do you want to sell to, and to what extent do you want to sell to? But on the other side is right, it's always a challenge on what do I prioritize afterwards, right? So do I prioritize marketing to have more reach? Do I prioritize on sales, CS, partnerships? Somehow you need to manage all, somehow the resources are limited. So what's your approach here?
There are two things here. One is, I think the kind of people that you need to lead your go to market in the early days is very different from the kind of people that you need when you already have all the structures in place. And again, there are no typical numbers that I want to place, because every company is different, and companies are scaling much more quicker. But typically, what I've noticed is the 1 to 10 million scaling requires a completely different persona to 10 to 20 million to 20 to 100 million. And it's essentially focused on people having a more of a product hat in the 1 to 10 million, that you need people who are really passionate about the product, who can work under chaos, who don't always need the perfect data available to be able to kind of help you to scale the first 10 million.
And how to build trust, right? Through the convincing, the own conviction, how you call that, of the own belief in that product, right?
Exactly. So the conviction is very, kind of indexed on the product in the first, I think, the 10 million. So you need people who are really more product oriented, rather than probably the best managers or the best, people with the best process stack in place. But then the second, it's really the people who can develop other people to grow. These are good managers, these are empathetic leaders that helps you to take from 10 to 20 million. And from 20 million onwards, it's those people who are extremely good on the operations front, who can build structures that are repeatable, scalable, and which can be, running even in the absence of them for a couple of weeks, are those people that are going to be really helpful from 20 million onwards. So it's the product people, the people person, then the process people that will actually help you to get 100 million.
let's say you understand, or we have the trigger that the GTM strategy now really needs to come in order to, let's say, remove the chaos. What are your first steps? How do you do it, and what's your approach to really define it for them, or help them to have the right decisions on it?
I think that's where, one of the areas which, I really love about, I'm passionate about, is to kind of start to build on your RevOps team. Revenue operations is usually, it's a thankless job, like, but it's probably one of the most critical component for you to start building from early on. And the way I define revenue ops is it's a combination of three things, right? So the first thing is really about enabling data in a transparent fashion, which is the same data that people have access to across your organization. So that's really focused on reporting and so on and so forth. The second area is really focused on systems. They need to ensure that they are enabling your go to market team, especially, to not worry about, whether their Zoom is working, whether, they have access to their pitch decks, whether they need to, you know call logging, in an automated way, like everything that's got to do with systems, right? And there are multiple stack that they are managing. And the third area that's important is for them to enable the salespeople, so that they're educating them, they're enabling them with the same knowledge on an ongoing basis. So all these three things are important, and I think the RevOps team takes away a lot of chaos in a systematic fashion once you start to enable them on these three pillars. That is reporting,
Fair.
systems, and sales enablement.
So I would invest quite early into RevOps, because what I see even in very early startups, yeah, is
Yeah,
it develops quite fast that the three, four, five functions, which if we have partnerships as well, develop they build their own silo in the end, yeah, and because they're all managers, then yeah, and then they focus on obviously their own goals. And for me, the RevOps is the keeping it together, right? Holistically managing it, understanding requests, how they work into each other, because it's all connected in the end, right? If I change something here, it needs to fit into the next role along the customer journey. And I think as better RevOps is, and I truly believe it should be a senior role, right? For me, in an early stage startup, it's even more important to have their senior role instead of a
yeah,
student, right, doing it and then being the better admin, because
yeah.
holistically managing it and keeping it together, that's the challenging part, right? Already preparing more or less for future growth while managing consistently end to end, instead of fixing here and there everything, which is then not going hand in hand into each other, and then creates more, most of the time, even more problems or more manual work.
I fully agree. I mean, in fact, today I think we have another unique problem that arises if you don't build your RevOps sooner, which is that you can't actually monetize and benefit from a lot of the AI tools that are coming up in the market. Some
Yeah,
of
I
them are
go.
really incredible, but then it's useless if you don't have your foundation accurate, if you don't have your data, accurate. And there are so many other problems that comes up. But I think the latest problem is the fact that, you really can't monetize the amazing set of AI
Yeah,
tools.
the pressure is higher now. That's what we see as well, right? Because what I'm always saying is, look, yes, we can talk about AI, but let's talk about your basics, your foundation, because right, you have bad data, and then you cannot do a data project because operation feeds good data, not data feeds data, right? So if you don't have a structured approach how to run your go-to market, how to run your customer journeys on the segments, on the different motions, the AI will not really help you to become more efficient. Maybe we can use AI for the next email war, right? Which nobody wants to get, but I don't think it brings you further. And I think that's a very interesting discussion, because if you want to really leverage the new technologies for you and not only talk about it, then you need someone who holistically manages it end to end, who understands it, who understands the dependencies, brings you to a certain level of SOPs, which then moves right. And we always call it RevOps. For me, has one big function, which is I never seen in a company, or seldomly see. It's go to market controlling, and not in a financial way, because that's what everybody's doing, right? Looking at the cash flow numbers, and that's why quite often RevOps goes to finance. But in a way, hey, we have defined our SOPs, we have defined our foundation, how we operate. Now we need to control it, that we stick to it, right? And this for me moves the organization towards sales excellence, which then generates data, which then generates something where we can understand where the problems are. How did you handle that in your companies, right? When you built to 100 million, I think your RevOps team must have been quite strong supporting you.
We had, I mean, our RevOps team has seen its ups and downs, but we very soon realized that revenue operations and strengthening revenue operations is the key if you want to continue to scale, especially multi-product push. So we became a multi-product company over a period of time, that it was not just one product that we were selling, it was multiple products. But it became even more tougher when we moved from one market to another. Even in Europe, if you think about it, we started to scale from Central and Eastern Europe to Northern Europe to Western Europe. And we grew in clusters in the beginning. It was already complex, but then we moved from within clusters as well. So we were no longer looking at Western Europe as Western Europe, but rather the French market, the Spanish market, and so on and so forth. So every market had its own team, own, reporting. The systems were centralized, but still you need localized processes to enable the team. You got to measure the KPIs, which is going to be unique to every market. And this can only be done if you are building the RevOps team sooner, but also enabling them with the right number of people that you can actually scale a decentralized market development. So that became the key for multi-product and multi-market push. There isn't a way that you can do that without a strong foundation of RevOps, and that was the key learning, and that really helped us to get to a larger number of ARR over time.
Fair, interesting. Let's talk a little bit about. You just said multi-product, right? Let's talk. Let's dive a little bit into it. I would like to dive into the multi-country, because both is, I think, quite interesting topics. So, what do you see is the biggest challenge or the biggest trap? Yeah, companies fall into when adding a second product or adding more products than the first.
So, again, my personal belief is that for a company to succeed, they really need to have a portfolio of products, that each of the product can stand on its own feet. And secondly, they need to build a kind of like a repeatable playbook to grow different markets. But on the multi-product push, the earlier the company can unbundle value or create value by building products and adjacent and helping them to kind of scale, it's better. And this is applicable for all sectors, right? It doesn't matter which sector a company is in, but it's really important, especially when you're building a B2B SaaS or an enterprise company. It's extremely important that you're going with the portfolio of products over a period of time. So being a startup is completely fine, but with time you need to have multiple products. And just to give some data that I have seen from across the different companies that I've worked with, over a period of time, especially when you're scaling from 20 to 50 million onwards, you should already start to see 20 to 30% of your net new revenue that's coming from existing customers, because that's a clear indication that your customers are happy with your product. They're happy to believe in other products that you're releasing. They're happy to pay for it, that your NPS scores are growing. It's a very clear path for you to kind of unbundle products or to create new products that you can sell. But the second one that's also kind of like under focused is services. So you really focus on either one time service, but nothing around what can you do with the data that you may be collecting from across your customers. Can you build a consulting play? It can still be self service, but still it's a service. It can be one time, or it can be a repeatable service, that product that you're developing. But it's an area that's highly under focused or not developed till very
Yeah,
later
quite
on.
often they're afraid, right? They say, "Look, it's not so scalable. It's not so profitable," and then obviously the OpEx is a problem. On the other side, if you can really build something on your own data, which only more or less only yourself can consult, I guess the day rates you can get for it could be quite interesting.
Absolutely. So I think those are a few things that definitely can be focused in the early days. So
Fine.
that's for me the multi-product focus.
Fair enough. Yeah, I quite often see is like, look. I think one of the biggest challenge I see, and let's talk afterwards about the multi markets, is that especially when you're early, they're not stable enough with the first product, right? So you need to have right a certain number of good clients repeatedly buying your product and having it, and you have need to have a good base in order if a new product market fit, right? A new product is a new product market fit. A new market is a new product market fit. If this fails, you not completely fail, yeah, because the
Yeah.
rest brings enough stable business that hey, I can go now the next way because I have the stability to not putting the entire company at risk. And that's one thing quite often is a little bit underestimated by not doubling down on the current product to grow at least to a certain number of business to say, look, we have too many chances, yeah, in products, in markets, in whatever, and we go very fast, and then it fails, and then the company fails, and that's what we have seen quite often. But let's talk a little bit about scaling into multi-market, scaling across Europe, especially if it's so fragmented, right? Very different to the US. So tell us what is the smartest way of doing this?
So I think with multi-market scaling, first of all, I think in the early days, the usual play is to focus on the US market plus one more market, which is the standard play that many of the companies use on a when they're a global company. But when they're a European company, you typically pick your home market, whether it's France or Germany or Netherlands or whatever is your home country plus one more market. So that's the typical play that most of the companies start with. So for phase one for me is single product, single market, and that's what you will be focusing on. Phase two is also again, it potentially can be multiple product in the same markets, or it can be one product that you kind of scale to multiple markets. For me, the key is to understand European expansion, which is very different from how you will expand to other markets. And the way we looked at Europe was the fact that it's really four different clusters. And this is the general theme that most of the companies that I have seen in B2B and SaaS space look at. And that's, I think, the right way. So it's important that the first cluster you build can end up becoming your cash cow, because you need to show success in your home cluster or home market before you can think of expanding to other clusters. And the natural clusters that probably you have also seen, Michael, is the central and eastern European cluster, which is generally the German speaking market. Then you have your northern European market, which includes UK and some of the Nordic markets potentially, and so on and so forth. Then you have your Western European markets, starting with France, Spain, Italy to an extent, also some of the adjacent markets there. And then you have your Eastern European markets, which is everything from Poland onwards. So it's the key is to pick your home market, make them your cash cow, be dominant there, have a market share which is at least 10% of your target portfolio. That's when you start to get the confidence that you can build the same playbook that worked in your home cluster in other markets. The easiest thing that you can think of is to ensure that you can scale within your cluster if you want to be not risk oriented. So beyond Germany, build a cluster for Switzerland and Austria. Classic way that that I've seen many of the German origin
Yeah,
companies
yeah.
do. But I would be a big believer in going behind one of the big market in other clusters as phase two. So if you're winning in Germany, ensure that you can also win in the UK market or the French market. I think that would be the key for your success, to win in a couple of the core markets in every cluster before you can actually go at a market level, which is at every country that you build a minimum viable team to kind of scale this further. I've also seen some numbers associated that can help the team, but generally that's the European play that I think has worked for a lot of the companies. And
And
then
would
when
you
it
say then rather go local directly, or you scale from the headquarters? Or what's the what are the variables to decide this?
I would say in the initial days to focus on having one location where you build a cluster from before you can expand it to beyond that one cluster, because that creates, first of all, it creates a pipeline for leadership. It creates uniformity in the way that you're building processes, the pitch, the thinking that you can kind of like enable the founder mindset to trickle down to a lot of the other clusters. So it's helpful to start. For example, Berlin was our cluster for the Central and Eastern European market, and we before we could develop teams in other markets. That's where we had leadership that developed from for a lot of the other markets. So this is also something that I've seen in other companies that we can really double down on.
We talked about multi-products. We talked about multi-markets. Let's dive into the internal topics again. Let's start with values. So, what is how important are values for you, and how can we use values to build a long-lasting, performing culture? What's your take on this?
So values for me is probably one of the core on how you develop leadership within the company. So first of all, I think it's very important for while you can have the company values, it is very important for GTM leaders to kind of develop the value system for the GTM team. For me, I think the couple of values which are which probably is applicable for many of the companies is the fact that it's important to define certain behaviors, certain values that you as a leader first of all practice, and that
Mhm.
you would definitely value to a certain extent in everyone in your team. And that could be simple things like ensuring that you're hardworking. It could be the fact that you got to ensure that you're continually keeping yourself up to date on any of the knowledge topics. And the third one could be the fact that you're enabling people around you to succeed. So if these are your three key values, how do you ensure that you develop a vision for your team, a mission for your team, combined with the value system that can be trickled down is super important. The second thing that's super important equally is the fact that you have a consistent mechanism to highlight these behaviors when people showcase some of the best in class behaviors that are core to the value system, right? So I used to have a quarterly kind of call outs, and I was very conscious about the fact that I only highlight people who are the best in every value, and what was the initiative that they did, what was the outcome, and why we are calling out such people, right? And it's important to highlight the winners and do it in a consistent fashion. But also on the third element, to have a portion of your incentive plan that is connected to the value system, because incentive plans can be super beneficial to ensure that it's connected to the values. And you will see impact when you do this consistently for 2 3 quarters. You will start to see that the whole GTM organization is aligned to the thinking of your GTM leader. It's aligned towards the values and behaviors you stand for. They know what behaviors get appreciated, what behaviors need to
Mm.
be avoided. This is something that you got to build ground up, and it will show results very quickly, and it will be long lasting. So that is something that I would say is core to any GTM player.
Fair. And then the values more or less translates as well into habits of praising and doing this right and living it in the end.
Exactly. And I read this in multiple books, and I've have multiple leaders speak about it. I really love the 70 20 10 rule, where you kind of also trickle down the fact that for your GTM team, whether they are focusing on new business or existing business or RevOps or channel partnerships or any of the kind of like sub focus areas within your GTM team, 70% of their time on a weekly daily basis, I think they need to focus on their core KPI, but 20% they need to always think about what's the next pillar of growth that's going to help them. If it's, for example, a new business sales hunter, 70% is to focus on the pipeline that they have, but 20% they got to build the next pipeline that's going to help them next
Mm.
quarter, in this quarter. And the 10% is also very interesting. 10% is to think about the wild card that probably will never happen, but if it happens, it's going to be your big deal that's going to
Fair.
impact the rest of the year, right? Or the company's direction can change because of this one deal. And if 10 people are doing it, I can tell you that 9 of them will not succeed. It's just the
But
one
one way.
person will succeed, and that can really change the direction of the
Fair.
company.
And which already good enough, right? If it comes, and I think it's interesting to look at in this way, and then use the value as the key driver to bring it all together, right? And having. But let's talk a little bit about culture or orgs or structuring winning
Yeah.
orgs. Yeah, let's talk about performance indicators, or let's put it differently, right? You have built a great successful GTM org with dynamic yield, and you grew the company tremendously. What I guess every founder is waving for, right? To or is really looking for and aiming for, to grow the company above 100 million ARR. So, what is a winning GTM org? What do we need to focus on? How is it? How is it? What's the best way on structuring it, or starting this topic?
So, I do want to say that there is no silver bullet here, but I do
Yeah,
want to talk about
that's
key
clear.
areas which I think probably will help guide everyone. I think the first area is about how your organization looks like, so that it's aligned with the stage of growth that you are in. And the second area is around how you clearly develop everything around people, that is the values, the culture, the incentive plans that are backing up. And the third area is about how do you ensure that people are able to kind of operate in a way that it's efficient, it's effective, and that's everything got to do with processes. But on the winning org structure, I'm a firm believer of the fact that when you think about a go to market team, it has six pillars in it. The first pillar is the team that is focusing on ensuring that you're focusing on new business, and the persona is different, the people are different, and this is really the hunter mindset. And I really don't like the word hunting, but I do believe that there is an innate persona that drives people to want to be the people that are winning new deals. There's a second type of people who are really focused on ensuring maximizing value for customers. These are people that are amazing at renewing existing business, scaling existing business in a multi-product world, showcasing value from the commercial side, and so on and so forth. Then there's a third team that is really focused on your SMB mid-market sales, or building your opportunities. That's the inside sales team. This team is today going through a lot of change because of AI, but still, I think this is a team that can be molded into different ways. And they're also the pipeline for future hunters or farmers that can help your pipeline. Then you have your channel partnerships. Again, varies a lot between the type of go to market that you have, but still the team that can be super valuable, especially if you have product that requires a lot of resellers or technologies to succeed. And you have your revenue operations, which we spoke about. And the last team that is not probably required for every type of company, but still the core for complex products is solution engineers. And that in different combinations is going to be the team that you would structure in. But the second area that I do want to spend maybe a minute on is around everything that's got to do with values, culture, and incentive plans. And my big recommendation is to not to have an incentive plan that's static, that's forever. It needs to keep changing. It's a live document. The stage of company you're in, that you got to kind of update this. And here, one of the things that needs to get reflected is the fact that the things that you value in early days gets translated into an incentive plan, to get translated into values. Small examples like, do you value a multi-year deal, or do you value getting paid sooner? So those are things that the go to market team can actually negotiate, as long as you give clear directions that goes into incentive plans, value systems, and so on and so forth. And this can all be controlled and managed by thorough processes. So that for me is the key.
And I think here you need, in order to make that succeed, in my opinion, you need to structure it for it, right? Because you need to enable the teams to
Yeah.
be able to think it, right? So if you want to have multi-contract deals, which is, if it's possible, the thing you should focus on, but then build something around that the team can actually sell it, that they incentivized on it, and it's not, because sometimes I have the feeling, right, then we build something, or the companies build something, and then they expect But then they say, look, they're not doing it. And then I look, right, we look under the engine, and so we look in the engine, and there's like, yeah, but there's nothing structured in order to enable this. So how should they sell it? And I think that it comes back to the RevOps topic, right? When you have a team actually in charge of gathering ideas, developing things for it, developing the backbones in order to be able to operate, I think then you can be much more successful. So for me, it always comes back to your first point, right? On the RevOps, really in charge of holistically enabling the different teams and pillars.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think RevOps, I keep saying this, like it's the backbone of any good go to market. And I fell in love with RevOps over a period of time. I was not a big fan of RevOps because, it's really considered in the initial days boring,
Yeah.
necessary evil. It's, I need to update this, I need to. But when you start to think about RevOps and what the objectives are top down, and it becomes very clear for every person in the go-to-market organization, they start to value and they start to collaborate with RevOps. But it needs to start top down. Like RevOps is not
Absolutely.
an area that you can just say, okay, I'm going to hire a few people and let's see what they do. It doesn't work that way.
No, and it needs to be a clear focus, right? In some of the organizations, we see RevOps as huge teams, and then I was like, not sure if, first of all, if you intend, if the focus of this team is there. For me, RevOps brings alignment, more efficiency, ideally with some KPIs around how can we increase OTE to revenue ratio year by year through a supporting role, which is supporting that we work better, more transparent, more aligned, that we can use data to enable, let's say, the motion, but the team members, the collaboration. And for me, that's the clear focus of it. And it's, I'm truly with you here. It's a top-down approach to say, look, we position RevOps the right way, right? It's not a, quite often I see RevOps reporting to the VP sales, and then in the end they just do fields in the system, right? They a system admin, but they call it RevOps, and nobody takes it serious. But
Exactly.
it should not even be managed by an operational role because they're biased on, and especially if sales, right, with the high self-esteem, they always come with a feature, right, that I want this, not with the outcome, and they let the people who are good in structuring processes structures. And I think there's already quite often a mismatch, because if you set it up in the right way, if you're a good CRO understanding the, let's say, the holistic view, your VP RevOps is a quite powerful position in your go-to-market team, in my opinion.
Absolutely, 100% aligned.
So now we discussed a little bit on the process side, the backbone. Maybe let's discuss two more points, which could be interesting, because, in my opinion, one thing is how do we position the company, and how do you what is your the way to a successful positioning of the company, which, in my opinion, is heavily influenced by the CRO. And on the other side is, how do we connect these points, right, from the structure, the values, into the positioning and the culture. But let's start with the first point. What's your take on that? How do you do that?
And I know that we spoke a little bit about positioning earlier, but I think one of the key points which I did want to highlight is the fact that positioning is something that's changes, every now and then. When you have a new product, when you have a new competition, it changes a lot. But at any point in time, I think it needs to be very clear to the organization, especially for the go-to-market organization, what you stand for as a company that wants to win. Typically in a B2B company, I believe there are three, four ways that you can win. The first way is that you're truly innovative as a product, and it needs to show in your positioning, in your marketing documents. The second way that you probably win is because you have a strong vertical expertise, that there may be an Adobe or a Salesforce, but still when it comes to, let's say, banking and financial services, you are the number one company in this space, so you may have a vertical expertise in a particular kind of vertical. The third one could be pure regional dominance, right? So for any company that is, like, doing extremely well in any part of the world, in France you are the number one player. It should not change. So as long as the winning positioning is trickling down at this point in time, tomorrow you may be a company that not only wins in France but also across Europe. So you can change your positioning, but for the time being, the positioning needs to trickle down to the organization, and that's important for us to be aware.
And how do you get it done that when you have structured or when you run against the positioning and the that, let's say, all the members of the team really live this, yeah? Because it's right. The one thing is obviously to the outside, but it's more you live it culturally in the inside as more you can drive the performance in general.
Absolutely. I think that's why I think that's where again RevOps comes into play, because they are translating every document that comes from marketing or product marketing to be a document that sales enablement team ensures that the go to market team is trained, updated, acknowledged. There is constant reminders, reinforcement that's happening. So it's kind of like tied together, but translating positioning into go to market is again like one of the key roles of RevOps.
Let's dive in a little bit into the strategic topic of the CRO because we haven't touched that so much. What are the roles, or let's say, what are the execs you work very you need to work very closely with on a daily basis, right? Because obviously, as a CRO, you influence the GTM function, but growing from 1 to 100 million, you need the other execs most probably very closely, or you need to collaborate very closely. So, what is the most important function you collaborated with?
Look, I still apply the same kind of matrix that, it's the 70-20-10 rule. For me, the 70% of the time goes into working with my team, which is across the go-to-market teams. And then on the 20%, I have to collaborate with other departments, which are the adjacents. And the key collaboration happens, number one, with the product team. So you need to know that your team's feedback is flowing into the product team and vice versa, so that you're always working on the next product that will help you to kind of build a multi-product universe, or what can be strengthened within the core to ensure that you can increase the price, you can remove the discount, you can improve the retention, and so on and so forth. So the one of the key collaboration happens with the chief product officer or the product team. The second big collaboration typically happens with the CFO, and having a wonderful CFO that is supporting your vision, who's also kind of helping you to kind of avoid mistakes, because CFOs have a lens that is completely different from a chief revenue officer. So I've had the fortune of working with some incredible CFOs who always know the problems of the go to market team and try to come up with solutions that can help them. But listening to a CFO and collaborating with them is going to make a CRO even more stronger than they would be. So those are the two key people. And of course, you got to work with the CEO, you got to work with all your key stakeholders. But for me, in terms of like the order, I think working closely with the CPO and the CFO are
It's
key.
quite important. Yeah, especially right on the product side to really understand and be very aligned. And I think quite often, or where I see a successful collaboration is right when we CFO and CRO really collaborate on the strategic topics, where to need to put the focus on how we can bring it together, right, for the cash flow side, the board side. Yeah, and I think this collaboration is crucial to be really successful and aligned.
I would love to maybe give one anecdote. In the early days, we were going through a phase where we had quite a few churn, and we were not winning the big deals. And I still remember this statement, and love to kind of highlight this anecdote. I asked, like, hey, I think some of the ways we can change this, like, low phase, it was for a couple of months, is probably win some of the big deals that we have in the pipeline, and so on and so forth. One of the insight, like at that point in time, an executive from the finance team said is, Anoop, if you can't value your small deals, you don't deserve the big deals. uh, so, so for me, that was, basically what, she wanted to tell me was that, hey, keep up with the cadence of winning. It doesn't matter big or small. At this point in time, you're really, in a bad shape. So it's important to start winning something, and then you will deserve to win all the big deals, but don't worry about the big deals till you don't focus on your
Fair.
smaller deals. Again, this is an interesting statement because I think it also applies to customer success. If you don't value your small customers, you don't deserve to retain your big customers. I think it applies everywhere, including culture. If you don't do the small things right, you don't deserve the big appreciation that
Yeah,
you
I
that
like
comes.
the anecdote. I think it's a good learning. Yeah, because right sometimes the nitty gritty part is as important as the big topics. Yeah, and
Exactly,
I like it.
exactly.
And let's talk about a little bit the biggest buzz, obviously, of our time, AI. Yeah, we quickly touched it with the sixth question, but maybe to get your take on it. So, how is AI changing go to market or sales in general? And
Yeah.
what is your prediction?
So first of all, what's happening is incredible, right? I think we can, on one side, we can be insecure about what's what the changes that we are going through, or we can adopt to kind of become even more better than we are today. But I would say that one of the areas that being disrupted quite quickly is inside sales. We have a lot of automation that's coming into play, but also a lot of good companies that are making things better. But I think the four areas, if I were to think about how AI is impacting us, is it's number one, it's bringing hyper personalization at scale when it comes to the go to market, the sales pitch. Number two, it's helping account executives with real time intelligence, and there are many companies that are doing this. But this third one, which I think we all love, is the fact that there's a lot of automation that is removing the boring stuff that that we did not want to do, like updating Salesforce, etc. I think that's getting automated. Lastly, I think it's taking away the burden of redundancy of repetitive task away. So it is in fact taking away some jobs, it is taking away some roles, and that is the fact of what's happening today. But it is at the same time enabling us to do more with fewer people, which means that we still can enable a lot more companies to be supported by these people. But I think what we are seeing is just the tip of the iceberg. I think this is going to continue. This is going to change over the course of the next 5 to 10 years. I think it's going to be very interesting um,
Absolutely.
how
I
things
truly
will.
believe so as well.
Yeah,
And even though I don't think it's a shortcut, yeah,
yeah,
which some companies take it somehow, I still think if you're very dedicated on and very thoughtful how you structure, define, and strategize your go to market, you can use AI in the best way of enabling you, making better, faster, more efficient. If you just run on the shortcut, it most probably will not make you to succeed, or even could be even not good for your brand because you send now more and more of this noise nobody wants to receive, right? Because on the efficiency side, what we see, it's super interesting. Yeah? It takes away a lot of work. You can really concentrate on what matters, and matters is building trust. Yeah, if it's a small deal or big deal, you win it by building the trust with others. Yeah, and obviously it helps you to be, if you have structured well, to be very prepared. And I think that's the very interesting thing. And on the other side, what I really like as well is for what you said about documenting, yeah, because one big topic, obviously, of all sales is documenting in general. But one big topic of the older companies is that they have more or less no idea what's happening on their client side, right? Because sales, the older salespeople, they own the relationship. If they leave, and they gonna leave one day, this relationship is gone. And if now the systems help to document better, to better understand, it gives
yeah.
them a chance. Yeah? And I think that's what we're seeing, and that's very good as well, because I guess if you have worked 30 years in the same job, you will not, on some things you just will not change. Yeah.
Exactly.
And some parts it's there. I have one last question. Yeah. Or let's actually two. One, let's quickly on the AI side. From your investor lens, yeah, what's your focus on in startup? What ability do they need to have with AI to leverage their go to market?
I think the first important thing is to get your structures right, and make it be available in a way that you can actually build AI companies on top. And this is the classic thing, right? First, get your, whether it's your Salesforce or HubSpot or any of your toolkit, right? That it is interoperable with other tools to be integrated. And once you have these structures in place, just make sure that your team is doing the minimum amount of work that they need to be doing still to get the AI tools to work. But the second one that I would always advise is to not just overburden yourself with too many things for the sake of a fancy tool in the market. Let's buy. But always think from the lens of, how can you have a platform that's all connected with one another, and only buy things that you can actually utilize. I've seen many companies that have three, four tools that they never use, like, for 90% of the time, and it's just a waste of money and time and resource. So always ensure that you are buying products that is utilized by 90% of your team. Otherwise, there's no point in
Absolutely.
more tools.
Totally agree. So we discussed all the six different pillars. But if, let's say, if a founder only remembers one, which one? Which one should it be? What is the most important thing they should focus on, and why?
For me, it's the culture piece. If you get the culture right, you have the right, kind of set of leaders who are able to kind of bring in, you know, everything else is definitely hygiene factors. You need to have people who understand what is GTM. You need to have people who understand how to do multi-product scaling. You need to have people who understand RevOps. All those are hygiene, but you can go wrong with hiring the wrong type of person you want to bring into your organization. So having the person who focuses on values, culture, building scalable structures, I think is far more important, especially when you're scaling beyond 10 million, than to just get people who know how to do something very well.
Anoop, I think this discussion could go on for hours. Thank you very much for your time. Super interesting. Super interesting what you have achieved so far. So big congrats on this. I think that's outstanding. And thanks for the conversation.
Thanks, Michael. We'll be in touch.